started now. Good evening and welcome to the 2017-18 Gertrude Lindesmith Lecture in South and Southeast Asian Studies. The Lindesmith Lectureship was generously established in 1986 by two great benefactors of Carleton, Winifred and Atherton Bean, both of the class of 1931, to honor the memory of Winnie's sister Gertrude Lindesmith, a 1929 graduate of Carleton, which majored in English, was a reporter for the Carletonian, and was elected to Phi Beta Kappa. Married to a Carleton graduate who taught sociology at Indiana University, Gertrude served for many years as the chief tutor of foreign students at Indiana. She developed particularly close friendships with students from South and Southeast Asia, and developed a deep love for that part of the world. Traveling in Asia, she visited her former students in India, Thailand, Indonesia, and Myanmar, and Afghanistan, or maybe not Myanmar, Afghanistan, and also spent a year in India on a Fulbright fellowship. She died in 1985. Past presenters of the Lindesmith Lecture at Carleton, which is Carleton's most important lecture series with regard to South and Southeast Asia, have included the economist Amartya Sen, anthropologists Clifford Geertz, Melford Spiro, and Bernard Obesekere, political scientist James Scott, historians W.H. McLeod, Vohra Metcalf, and Eleanor Zelliot, writer and filmmaker Uday Prakash, feminist activist Kamala Bhasin, literary scholar Ruth Vanita, and scholars of religion such as Diana Eck, Bruce Lawrence, Donald Lopez, and Wendy Donahue. This year's Lindesmith lecturer, Paromita Vohra, is a filmmaker and writer from Mumbai, or Bombay, whose work mixes fiction and non-fiction to explore themes of urban life, popular culture, love, desire, and gender. The work spans various forms: film, sound installation, digital media, writing, interactive workshops, and acting, and has been broadcast internationally. It has been shown in museums such as the Tate Modern and the National Gallery of Modern Art in India, and is taught in universities around the world. In 2012, Time Out Mumbai listed her as one of 10 people to change the way Indians watch films. Her films as a writer include the acclaimed feature Khamosh Pani, or Silent Waters, and various documentaries. Away from film, she has written a comic. Her writings have been featured in various popular anthologies, as well as academic journals. She also writes two weekly columns, Paranormal Activity and How to Find Indian Love in Mumbai Mirror, besides occasional pieces of cultural commentary in various popular and academic journals. Since 2016, she has been a principal tutor at the Yangon Film School's docu-animation course on gender-based violence. She is also the founder and creative director of Agents of Ishq. Ishq is the Urdu word for desire. Agents of Ishq, a first-of-its-kind digital project about sex and love in India. As a filmmaker, writer, and public intellectual, and as a public feminist, Paromita is one of the most vital and insightful and playful voices on issues of gender, sexuality, desire, art, power, etc. in South Asia today. And her talk this evening, which will encompass the body and the body, will give us, I'm sure, new and unlikely ways of thinking about these issues in South Asia and beyond. Please join me in welcoming Paromita Vohra.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me in the back? Everywhere. So thank you very much, Arun, for that introduction, and thank you for inviting me. It's actually great to hear the history of the series and spread of the story. So today I'm going to do that very obnoxious thing that artists do, which is basically talk about my work. I always think how egocentric it is that we go to places that we force people to listen to us talking about our work, and it's interesting that artists are both extremely arrogant and self-obsessed in that way, but also racked by all kinds of self-doubt, anxiety, loser feelings, all of that. And in that sense, I think being an artist is a lot like being a lover, right? Like they are both the same conditions of egotism and humility at the same time. As a documentary filmmaker, particularly one working in India, and especially one interested in political conversation and social change, you inherit a form. The documentary world over is associated with a sense of politicalness. And this politicalness is defined very much in terms of a noble, impassioned political heart, speaking for others. Existing as it does outside of the commercial mainstream, the documentary carries with it no small implication of nobility and commitment, worthiness and high-mindedness, and the willingness to be a little bit bored for a political cause. Although these are gross generalizations and discourses of art exist around the documentary as well, these are few and rarely under discussion when it comes especially to the global south, otherwise known as the third world, our pet name. So the mainstream documentary idea privileges realism, rationality, and selflessness, and equates these with the truth, a higher truth even. The narrator filmmaker comes with a halo of honesty, and one is expected to believe in this noble foray. In fact, I would say that these forms, shorn of frivolity, of excess, of emotional unpredictability, and most importantly, of pleasure for the sake of pleasure, function as an aesthetic imperative. I would go so far as to say a masculine ascetic warrior aesthetic, which puts the documentary on a pedestal and accrues a cultural and moral privilege for the filmmaker. In other words, and that's it more simply, it's like when you make a documentary, you have to be, you're automatically more interested in other people than yourself, apparently. Because documentaries don't function in that kind of cinema hall, commercial logic, people always think that the documentary filmmaker has no reason to make a film except for other people. And therefore, all kinds of social privilege accrues to the filmmaker, but it's disguised under this kind of mask, which the filmmaker also believes in, I think, of caring about others. As a young woman working in post-liberalization India, I found this picture of the documentarian very hard to accept. I found also these kinds of political approaches insufficient to express the political anomalies of my life. I was socially committed but upwardly mobile, middle-class liberal elite. As someone who lived in tenement housing, I also found it insufficient to describe the lives of the people living around me. Both their aspiration to do better, their animosities towards me, their desire for middle-class people to do something for them, but a kind of uneasy relationship that existed between middle class and my middle-class self and my working-class neighbors, which made me think that all people, including filmmakers and their subjects, have mixed motives, which never actually find their way into the way that films are made. And that, in short, I found it insufficient to describe life itself. And I felt that it didn't provide a political conversation that opened up possibilities and the energies that are needed for social change to happen. Because I don't really think that you can make films and put the right kind of content in them and then society is going to change. I think that films work in a very different way. They work by changing things inside us. Something in our physicality changes, our body as it's watching a film changes, and we take that change outside the room with us and maybe change something in the world with it. So as artists, I think we do need to ask again and again if the forms that we are using are really relevant for the times that we live in. Because if our forms remain constant, then what we're really saying is politics remains constant and people remain constant, and in fact, nothing is changing. So we claim that our forms are about social change, but if we are merely reproducing forms that illustrate that we are political, without really communicating and interacting with the world around us, then all we're doing is saying, I'm political, but nothing is really changing, right? So it was that I began, and I was saying, I also was, of course, working in documentary, both as an assistant and then later as an independent filmmaker. And it's not like, I wasn't working in conventional form. I was, but I was deeply uneasy with what was being told to me is the way to make films. So I was beginning already to search for another way of speaking about political ideas, but as importantly, aesthetic ideas, which would be true to the endeavor of what a documentary film actually, I think, is. It is not something in which we speak for other people. In fact, at a very basic level, a documentary, not just a film, but any documentary endeavor, is really when we speak with other people. Either we speak with the subjects of our films, or we seek to speak with our audiences. So I'm not really sure how the ventriloquism of, I'm speaking for other people has begun to impose itself in the documentary. So I am going to describe, I'm going to talk a bit about this aesthetic search and what I learned and what I feel I keep learning about how we can talk about politics to people in a way that maybe matters in their lives. And I would like to describe this journey I've had and this form that I feel I've found as the lover's argument. So what is the lover's argument? It is a contest of sorts between lovers, but it is more in order to be heard than to win sometimes. It is also a constant because it's one episode in a series of episodes of arguments and conversations that lovers have with each other. It's rich, one might say too rich, with history and memory, of resentment, of longing, of pleasure, of association, shared experience, and dangerous knowledge of each other. Very importantly, lovers' arguments eventually are in the service of a connection and not of an estrangement, actually. Lovers argue, of course, sometimes to control each other, but they argue believing that they are kind of on the same side, not on opposite sides. If one were to search for a creative form that is mapped along the lines for lovers' argument, what might that form be like? For me, it was actually the form that I feel has most influenced me and informed all of my work, my writing work and my filmmaking work, which was the Bollywood film song, the Hindi film song, but especially the love duet. So I'm going to play you a couple of examples of that. Love's arguments are designed for play, not only for fighting, although also for fighting. And yet it seems to me that every argument of this kind between lovers is also an argument about the nature of love and what it means, whether it is worthwhile or not, what is its place in the world. In other words, a philosophical argument about love. However, every set of lovers, and I'll say set, not couple, right, not pair, every set of lovers is also an argument with the world in quite the same way. Each love is a proposition of how love might behave or what kind of relationship it might manifest, how it might make, what emotions and relations it might make possible. So in fact, it is a form of theorizing about love in the doing of love. And I feel it is a form of theorizing also through the interplay of individuals vis-a-vis each other, as well as the collective unit of lovers vis-a-vis the world. Again, a convergence and divergence, or as feminism has described it, the personal becoming the political and the political becoming the personal in a constant state of flow, not stasis. The individual becomes part of a unit, which in turn affects the individual, rather also like sex. The individual and the collective strive to coexist without one subsuming the other. So it seems to me that the distinction between fiction and non-fiction, for example, in these kinds of songs, also starts to vanish because they're having this kind of non-fictional argument in a fictional format. So it's a very fluid form. It's actually allowing for pleasure and intellect, politics and playfulness all to coexist in one place and in a very neat kind of construction, which you're not aware that you're consuming in that fashion. You are consuming it and you are thinking those thoughts. And these songs remain important even outside the structure of the film because they become a kind of intellectual engagement for people as they think about those songs and as they use them to make sense of their emotions. But I think that this analogy with feminism has been important for me because I feel like this idea of the personal and the political, which is a very potent idea of feminism, kind of is getting lost in that we have reduced feminism to a very kind of utilitarian notion of equality more and more as we talk about it. And we forget how much it is about power and the various flows of power and understanding those. So why is it that when we discuss political ideas, we are so keen to speak of love as a goal, but not as a basis for how we structure our arguments and forms? I've been constantly animated by this question, how to take love seriously as a way of understanding political exchange and social change. Can the documentary form, which deals with actuality, with other people's lives and shifting fruits, be expressed in a similar way as the love duet? And what might that achieve? Can its arguments be made with all the layers and simplicity of a song, not only through the binaries of law and justice and right, or the detached observational method, but the invested, implicated, and the diverse emotions of love songs? Can we, in doing this, also push towards a new definition of the argument itself as a conversation rather than a contest? For me, the idea has been to find some way of thinking about all the relations involved in documentary practice then through this format and through this world of metaphors of love and desire. Can we think of this as a relationship between filmmaker and subjects, in which case it would lead to numerous definitions of intimacy? If we look at the film song and we see how many types of love songs there are, and if we think of love itself and how it makes a number of types of relationships possible, and then we start to imagine that, well, the filmmaker and the subject are in a kind of lover's argument, then what we're really saying is that there is no one meaning of intimacy with the documentary subject, which is the orthodoxy we've been given. That you form a kind of intimacy of politics and you convince yourself and the subject that you really care about how the subject's life could change via your film. But perhaps this is not the only possible intimacy. Maybe there is a range of intimacies, the way there is a range of intimate relationships that is possible between filmmaker and subject. The documentary is really produced out of an exchange that takes place between artists and subjects. And our very interaction means we modify each other. It's not just that I'm modifying the subject, but the subject too is modifying me as we're involved with this. So is it possible to think of a form that accommodates, if not foregrounds, this interaction that has taken place? The other thing about lovers is that they are unreliable narrators. They resort to tricks and seductions. They are extremely self-interested. The lover's argument is not a selfish argument. It is a self-interested argument. They are invested in the love relationship. And they have some skin in the game. So can one put that out there in a filmmaking process without moral judgment and moral meanings? How could one present this idea that the filmmaker is invested in the argument and has a kind of political axe to grind without it becoming, very morally laden, like I'm going to confess that I have an axe to grind, or look, I'm such a bad person, I have an axe to grind. Like, how do we put it in there without this false self-reflexivity. So one of the methods that I have been using in my work over time, since 2002 when I made a film called Unlimited Girls, is the idea of an unreliable but likable narrative. Right? So because that's the other thing, that we think unreliability is bad, but it's not necessary. I mean, there are certain, I'm going to explain why I think unreliability is a good thing. So I began to play roles in my own films from 2002, and it came from the desire to find a narrator whom we would like and be involved with, but would constantly feel a little unstable with as we were watching the film. But we could disagree with the narrator without anxiety. Normally, disagreeing with a documentary creates a certain amount of anxiety and stress. And I think we see its extreme form in political discussions online today, right? Where disagreement creates anxiety. It is a violent experience. So how could one structure a film so that disagreeing with the film would not be a violent experience, but a stress-free experience? So there's an I that is present in all my films, almost all my films. But that I is a little bit hard to define. Like, is it I, Paromita, the filmmaker? Is it somebody else? Sometimes you see her, sometimes you don't see her. Sometimes you see her, she's dressed as well. I'm sure you've already seen the poster, so you have a sort of sneak preview. So this is a clip I'm going to show you from my sorry.
It's been one of those times, a season of discomfort. I've been feeling alone and adrift, and doubting the choices which have made up my life. Days are still and restless. Not many answers blowing in the wind are there, Paul. And I don't know about you, but when I'm not sure what I'm looking for, I look for, love. You think it's an escape? Oh, come now. Let's just call it a little diversion from the more complicated questions of our life.
Feminism is a process, not an identity
doesn't it really become about joining a group and meeting agendas?
Groups are important for making change on a wider level.
You can't really change people by scolding them in groups.
Can you change them just by setting a good example?
Okay, one sec. Don't get me wrong. I understand I owe many of my freedoms and choices to feminism, and I believe in the principles.
But won't risk calling yourself one. What do you think you will lose?
That same freedom. Of course, the freedom to be confused, to see things in many ways.
What's the difference between openness and merely keeping your options open?
Good old-fashioned thought. Please, this is the black and white thing I mean. One difference of opinion and bingo, you're a hero or villain.
What you are saying is feminism works for you, and that's enough. But is it?
You got me there. If I say yes, I'm selfish. If I say no, well, what's my choice then? Or will you punish me, Marxist Rusha?
Darling, I could spank you if you like.
Where am I to go?
So, you never see Fearless, like you never see Fearless in full form through the film. She's always only visible at the edge of the frame, her hands, her shadow, half a reflection, that kind of thing. And Fearless also keeps changing through the film. Like by the end of the film, she's quite proud to claim that she's a feminist, and she goes through this journey. Now, obviously, I, Paromita, did not feel that I'm not a feminist when I began the film, but obviously I was playing Fearless, and the whole film is narrated in the first person, so it's a little bit confusing whether you should just like stop thinking for yourself and repose all your trust in this Fearless character. And, well, anyway, how fearless is she really? You don't know since you never actually seen her. But none of these things are really present in the film in a very kind of there's no animosity towards the character. It's just this feeling like, I don't know, maybe she's a dodgy proposition. In another film, a far dodgier character.
So that was my first meal in Bombay City. Mandeli curry and rice. It was so good. I decided to stay here forever. I blessed the city, and I said as long as I stay, the people here will never go hungry. Well, you can't keep a thing like that secret for long. So people were flying in from everywhere, and they were eating. Oh, they ate and they ate. There were new restaurants opening every day. And who do you think was in the market? It was me. Annapurna, goddess of food. It was such a wonderful plan. All of us happy together. It's been a trance just thinking about it.
I don't know where.
Why do you not know it?
To love somebody, I think you don't require a reason. I'm part of Bombay.
When anyone comes, immediately the person is accepted. We never feel that he is an outsider. You feel that he is from Bombay. And that Bombay's culture is great quality because of which Bombay is possible.
Really, things were going quite well. And then, she came along.
That's the problem with Annapurna. I shouldn't be talking about my own sister like this, but she was always the jealous kind. You know, full of that sibling rivalry. She says live and let live, but really she wants everybody to be like her. Like, I don't like going out at night, mixing around with strangers, being the party girl. It's okay now. I'm happy like this. Anyway, you tell me, can you make a house out of onions and cucumbers and fish and whatnot? No, no. To lead a decent life, you require me, Lakshmi, goddess of wealth.
Om Rim Shri Lakshmi Bhyon.
So this is a film about food politics in Bombay and about the contest between vegetarian fascists and traditional communities and new communities who eat meat. And it's played out, it's just a 13-minute film, and it's played out as a battle between Annapurna, the goddess of food, and her sister, not technically a sister, but all goddesses are basically forms of each other. Lakshmi, who is the goddess of wealth, for control of the city. And also the two people that you see in the film, the man who says, I love Bombay, and the woman who says, well, Bombay welcomes all outsiders, who seem to be on the same side, are actually the head of the Vegetarian Society of India, and a woman who is fighting with her neighbor who doesn't want the fish seller to come to the house, and she's like, whether I buy fish or not, he's going to come in here. But the thing is that the film doesn't present them in opposition. This opposition is not polar opposition like that. It's kind of like a few degrees removed. And when you think about it, Annapurna and Lakshmi are really talking about two versions of the same idea of plenitude, right? One in terms of food and the other in terms of money. But it's the same concept. And Annapurna is, here the narrator is split between Annapurna and Lakshmi, although Annapurna is the principal narrator. But she's quite a silly character, right? I mean, she's cute. But she's like, oh, we were all happy together, and I was inaugurating restaurants, and life was so good, and then this Lakshmi chick came and quite fun. So the thing is, you like her, but you're not really going to rely on her. So she's not the moral center of the film. She's one of its many moral centers, right? And similarly with Fearless and Chunky, who meet in the chat room and then continue to talk through the film, as Fearless makes this entire exploration of feminism and trying to understand it, they are not I hate feminism and I love feminism kind of debate. It's like, well, I kind of believe in feminism, but I don't want to call myself one, and the other one is like, if you believe in it, why don't you want to call yourself one? So these are arguments where people are invested in the arguments. They are not arguments of people who are interested in proving the other person wrong. They care about the central idea just in different ways. And so the entire film is actually a conversation between these kinds of characters. But eventually, eventually it's not only a matter of the narrative, right? The construction of the unreliable narrator does an important thing, which is it decenters the filmmaker a little bit. When the filmmaker is not the overt narrator, but this kind of covert, noble narrator of the film, the filmmaker is really at the center. But when the filmmaker is decentered in this way, all filmmaking gets centralized. And it creates a relationship between the film and the audience rather than the filmmaker and the audience. It ceases to be a stock relationship where I will present my political opinions and you will come and feel noble and uplifted because you watched that film. Rather, it becomes a relationship between you and the film, which could really go any which way, we don't know, like it may not work out also, right? And I think what it does is that it also creates a relationship of pleasure. As you can see from the way that these narratives play out, that there is a kind of performance enthusiasm, there's music, I mean, that's just the fun of acting. Like every time I see Lakshmi, I do start laughing because she is such a good actor and she has done the role with such excitement and interest and witchy interest that it's fun to watch. So there's a kind of a sense of pleasuring the audience and seducing the audience, much like the lover's argument that is involved. What it's really doing is that it is encouraging audiences to believe in the knowledge of their senses. This is not filmmaking that works by saying that, I've proven the other side is wrong, I have proven that this side is right, now you can supposedly make up your mind. In fact, it is just wanting you to get into a strong relationship, a sensual relationship with the film and feel all kinds of sensory feelings and believe that those sensory feelings matter. I think this is the most important thing that we can do with art, because art is about strengthening this place of the unspoken. And the sense impression that we have of something, which we are never allowed to privilege. Right? We're always supposed to function by this supposed rationality, but not by something that we sense is coming, or something that we fantasize would be a better world to live in, or the way we would like to be. And it is perhaps an effort also to locate political thinking in the realm of the sensual, to remind us that thinking is actually a highly sensual activity, and one to be enjoyed, not one to be carried as a burden. And that we don't really have to feel that we are superior to others because we are involved in the activity of thinking. Everybody is actually involved in the activity of thinking. There are other kinds of narrators that I consider to be in a dangerous liaison, because I think that there is a very big issue in documentary and many political forms of work where we spend a lot of time talking about things we don't like and people we don't like and the enemy, rather than really talking about the things that we love and the things that matter to us, right? So to give you an example of a dangerous liaison type narrator, I'm going to show you just a minute clip from a film called Morality TV and the Loving Jihad, which is about tabloid news and moral policing.
वो सुबह जब मीनू उठी, उसके नीचे सपने अब तक उसके जिस्म को छू रहे थे। काम से पहले वो अपने मजनू को चुप चुप के मिलने जा रही थी। मीनू ने आशिक की नजरों से अपने आप को शीशे में देखा, होंठ थरथराते यौन धड़कता। पर ये नाजुक कली नहीं जानती थी क्या अंजाम होगा इस मनोहर कहानी का। खूबसूरत नशा था। अपनी खुमारी में वो भूल गई थी कि मोहब्बत एक दो धारी खंजर है, जो उसे छूता है वो कटता जरूर है। मीनू से पहले कई अनछुई घड़ियां इस दर्दनाक सच के खिजां में मुरझा चुकी थी, क्योंकि जब खून में तेजी हो तो उसके बहने का खतरा तो होता ही है।
It's an unsettling kind of narrator because, obviously it seems to be a narrator of some pulp fiction, terribly sexist type of, sensational novel. And this is a film that is critiquing this kind of pulp fiction narrative present in news television. And I think it also is an interesting experience for the filmmaker, like for the filmmaker to inhabit the skin of the very thing to sleep with the enemy, so to speak, is unsettling and interesting because you also start to take deep enjoyment in writing this kind of thing. Like as you learn to think like the person you're critiquing, you're also kind of loving the things that they're good at doing, right? And I feel this is an interesting way in which to unpack what someone does because it allows you to retain contradictions. For example, Arnab and I got into a discussion about whether one can still love Vinod Khanna, a big heartthrob of the 1970s, because he went on to become a right-wing member of parliament. And so what do we actually do with these contradictions, right? And I don't think there's an easy answer, but at least one has to try to inhabit that space where the person you love is doing something you don't really like, or the person you dislike is doing something that is kind of fun, and acknowledge that there is this kind of fascination between the thing that we like and we don't like. And I think it's important to do all of these things because we also need to find new ways of talking about people we disagree with, right? For example, a lot of films about feminism, in my opinion, end up really becoming films about patriarchy because they're not really willing to open up all of this. So you think you're talking about feminism, but you're really going on about how patriarchy is so bad. So in effect, you're spending a lot of time talking about patriarchy. I don't see the point of that. And so I think, for example, you could try something like this if you were to talk about patriarchy.
What do you want to be when you grow up?
I don't know, auntie. Maybe a doctor or a teacher or maybe a feminist.
Your daughter wants to be a feminist. Don't get your fingers in a twist. Call moi. So, you want to be a feminist? Oh well. You want to be ugly? Do you want to be unloved and alone? Well, do you want to be cold and hard-boiled? So, still want to be a feminist? Got a case of feminism?
Don't worry, just hurry. Call us.
And be rescued.
So I think it's interesting, right? The moment you stop taking yourself that seriously, you have the chance of not taking the enemy, so to speak, that seriously either. But at a more serious level, what it is the possibility of finding a loving language to talk about the thing that you disagree with, right? I mean, this kind of dealing you could do with someone you love also. You could make fun of someone affectionately in this way, whether you like them or hate them. And maybe it could generate a completely new kind of conversation between people who disagree. To take on these forms, I think, involves a certain loss of privilege, right? Because there is privilege in following conventional forms of orthodoxies of form, in no matter what field you work in. But I think, of course, it does generate new privileges, like, you get to come here and talk to you guys. But it means choosing to give up a certain performance of your role as filmmaker, as savior, and to make yourself vulnerable as an artist. Because you're already saying, I'm going to make a movie that I hope that people will enjoy and engage with and experience the way that I think and feel like they should think that way too, because that's your skin in the game, you want people to think like you. But you are taking the risk that it might not work, because you're functioning by pleasure, not by control anyway. So I think finally what these forms do create though, is that they erase the boundaries between the popular and the politically significant. which has always been a very strong orthodoxy. And between the mind and the body, between gendered ways of exploring the world. They offer us the possibility of thinking through contradictions, and it becomes possible to make new forms that are queerer and more inclusive. The vitality of these forms strengthens the unspoken faces, and so it gives us confidence in our judgment and views. Confidence enough also to be wrong, to make mistakes, and to change our positions. It gives us a meeting place where we may bring our identities and our histories, but not be reduced only to those identities and histories, because we are meeting at a place of pleasure and engagement, not at a place of contest when we watch the film. And so we have the possibility of moving towards new identities and narratives for ourselves as individuals and as communities. I think what these forms also do, at least they have done for me, is they help to generate even newer forms. So in 2014, in 2012, many of you will know that there was a big gang rape in Delhi, and it became an internationally, a kind of flashpoint in the discussion around sexual violence in India, an internationally known case, and a huge amount of discussion on sexual violence started to happen, right? Now this was significant because it's not that there hadn't been brutal cases of gang rape before and murder like this, but for whatever reason this came into a kind of mainstream public discussion, and it put sexual violence on page 1, which sexual violence has never ever been. So what we find is that all the time people are talking about sexual violence and you're feeling like, wow, this is amazing, this is a feminist win, because we can talk about these things. And then you start thinking about it a little bit more and you're thinking, how are we talking about these things? What is really happening when we're talking about sexual violence all the time? And what you find is that there are two things that are being discussed in terms of sexual violence. One is that the only way in which we are talking about sex is in terms of sexual violence. And the only way in which we are talking about women is also in terms of sexual violence, because now that we put sexual violence on page 1, we don't really need to discuss anything else about women. We've given them a huge quote out the news, right? So think of what kind of image of women this is creating in the minds of people and in the minds of women themselves. What it ended up doing, I feel, is that it shifted the discussion from women's freedom to women's safety, which is not really the same thing at all. And it also shrank the space to talk about female desire, about sexual journeys of women, and eventually also of men, because sexual journeys are complex, both physically, emotionally, and socially, but we didn't really have a place to have any of those discussions because we were talking only in terms of violence, perpetrators, victims, etc. Right? So at this point it would have been easy for me to decide to make a film. I mean, that is what I did. But I also felt that the documentary itself as a form is not limited to film. It actually is possible to explore it in any type of interaction with the public, right? I mean, that's true of all art. So I decided to start this project called Agents of Ishq. Ishq, as Arnab said, I told you, is the Urdu word for desire, but it's also a word we chose because it mixes the idea of love and sex. It doesn't actually separate love and sex. The idea of Agents of Ishq was to have actually a sex education and sexual culture site for Indians. To have a conversation about sex which was loving, which was friendly, which actually gave people everything they needed to have, I will use a word I never like to use, but empowered sexual journey, right? You need information, you need conversation, you need a kind of emotional confidence. How do you create a form which can help you to have these things? What's the puzzle of Agents of Ishq? We wanted it also to be an inclusive space. We wanted it to be playful. So eventually, these are the things that happen. You enter Agents of Ishq only on the basis of love and sex. Right? We're not asking you what your sexual orientation is. We don't care if you're married, monogamous, polyamorous, whatever. If you want to talk about love, sex, and desire, Agents of Ishq is the place for you. And initially, I mean, this project has been like a growing up. I feel like I grew up a little bit with this project because I learned a lot of new things about India, about filmmaking, about myself. But as long as you're not normative in your approach, you're welcome in Agents of Ishq. So I discovered, of course, that many people who come in sometimes will be right-wing fundamentalists, but they are speaking about their sexual lives with a lot of tenderness and self-doubt and honesty, and there's no reason why this should not be there in that place, therefore. Right? So what happened is, I mean, these are the things that we made, right? We wanted this friendly, playful conversation about sex. So we could put out sex ed stuff in this way. For everybody who uses good morning after pill as contraception, don't do it. It's not good for you. We did genital knowledge quizzes. We created a character called Munda the Singing Condom. We would answer all your condom questions with a film song. We created a lot of beautiful art because I really feel art dignifies human experience. These are drawings by Amrita Patil, who is a well-known graphic artist and novelist. And this was from a series where trans people talked about dating. But as you can see, just gorgeous drawings. There were older bodies, younger bodies. It's not a site that's only for young people, it's for everybody, right? So you could be young or old, gay or straight. The idea was to be helpful to people, not just say sexual harassment is bad, but you can actually make an ishq move without it being a dick move. You can, and that was advice to be given to women and men alike. There were guides to kissing, anal sex, a reconnection with the erotic traditions of India, the history of sex education, which most people don't know about in India. I made some films.
How do these old tales on masturbation?
Ma? Masturbation is not as good as the real thing.
Oh, beta, ऐसे नहीं कहते. तो फिर all orgasms are different. अगर orgasms की ranking करनी ही है, तो women's strongest orgasms are by their own handmade. Second, by someone else's hand. And the weakest orgasm through generic thrusting.
Oh.
Masturbation, it's early.
What men talk about when they talk about sex. We would do a little bit of interaction because that is the common wisdom of being online, that you're supposed to be interactive. So for example, there was this huge Kiss of Love campaign that happened against modern policing. So we created a map with a word for kiss in every Indian language, which we crowdsourced. And then because it was so much fun to do it, like you ask people on Twitter and Facebook, like, what's the word for kiss in your language? And people would respond. We also got quite high on interaction. So we also did it, map of love. We've done a map of India's favorite PDA locations, all of that, right? And then we thought like, okay, wow, we can actually talk directly to our audience. So we decided to do a survey. And one of the reasons we did the survey was because we couldn't get straight men to engage in the discussion at all. Straight men around the world, my heart bleeds for you. Only a little bit. Only a little bit. So we did the Great Indian Penis Survey. We did a survey on the penis in which we asked men about their relationship with their penis. We didn't ask anybody else about the relationship with the penis, just you and your penis. And our intention was to open up a reflective kind of discussion with heterosexual men, or well, not heterosexual men in general, cis men, about their bodies. And we did not think that people would respond to a survey about their dicks, but actually more than 1,000 men responded. Right? And these are some of the things, the fun facts. Please check out Chairman Mao. I'm with Shah Rukh Khan, and we all know why I'm pointing it out. If you don't, we can learn. It's the relationship that people have, different relationships that they have. But actually what emerged was that, there is a common understanding around homophobia and how men respond to each other's bodies and their own bodies, which is a very American narrative, which we also find prevalent in Indian mainstream media. But that's not really the relationship that emerged for Indian men with their bodies. We also found from the survey that the more communicative people were in sex, in their sexual relationships, the better their body image, or maybe the better their body image, the more communicative they were. So this became a really interesting way of engaging with the audience and feeding back what they were telling us to them through these very enjoyable posts. We had one on female masturbation. You can speed read this because I'm going to tell you a funny fact about this, that basically this post went viral so that we ended up on the Comedy Central Snapchat. But there was so much Chinese whisper that by the time the survey had reached things like the Comedy Central Snapchat, it had begun to say that 17% of women in India use the old Nokia vibrating phone as a vibrator. Whereas it was really 17% of the women who use any other kind of appliance to masturbate, right? But anyway, Nokia comes back to India, I think we are to blame. It's also amazing the kind of stories people have, how humorous and But this was amazing, yes, that people in India were speaking like this, they were so cool, it was so warm, the whole interaction. But I think something much more surprising happened. And it takes me back to the idea of feminism, which I believe is not, it is a way of asking questions of the world, right? It gives us a frame to ask questions and navigate the world. It's not a way of having all the answers, which seems to have become its bad reputation. So what was the question that we asked in Agent of Ishq? It was a very simple one. Do you want to be an agent of Ishq? Small print, not an agent of change. You don't care. And this is the kind of email we began to get. How can I become an agent of Ishq? I want to become, please note the last one. Sir, madam, tell me something about this, what can I do? That was it, right? I mean, this was kind of awesome. And then people began sending us like poems, personal accounts, their own stories, their drawings. For fans, Paromita Roy, a poem about masturbation. Okay, move. From a series called Lost and Found Poems of a Girl Who Liked Sex. But I think that we put so much beautiful art really help people feel that this dignifies my experience. These people aren't just taking my experience and using it for sensational purposes, but they are actually making something beautiful out of it. People began sending us these kinds of stories. I'm going to show you a very quick selection of the kind of things they sent us. And finally, we ended up having the AOI podcast, where people actually tell stories about their sexual lives. We have people from rural areas, urban areas, straight and queer. The stories are amazing, right from my first vibrator was the washing machine at home, which I discovered by accident by sitting on it, to a story of a woman in a tiny village in the north who left her husband because she fell in love with the driver of her company's Jeep, and how they lived together without being married, which is not something that you imagine can happen in small town, even in rural India, right? So in a way, it also showed us in India, we didn't know it's there. It actually recreated a loving relationship between what is India and India's sexual life, and how we look at it. So we were no longer looking at India as a place that needed saving sexually, which is how all the language of sexual violence and around sexual violence is. But it actually became a conversation between people who wanted to make sense of their lives. And what ended up happening, like 70% of our material on Agent of Ishq is now user-generated. And it becomes actually the collective wisdom of people sharing with each other what they have learned along their sexual journeys. The mistakes they've made, that they've learned from, they don't regret making mistakes, you know. So mistakes don't become like, they don't freeze you in this kind of place of eternal victimhood. But they are all stories which help you to move on, even if they're stories where somebody has been abused over there. When the Aziz Ansari and the Me Too movement started, we decided to do something a bit unusual. We put out a call called Sex Actually. Tell us a sexual experience you can't forget. Here's a quick sample of the kind of stories people sent us, which is something you'd expect. But you've also got these kind of stories. I think what we learned is that we all struggle. We are struggling right now when we talk about Me Too and sexual violence with how do we speak about sexual pleasure at the same time that we speak about violence. We acknowledge everything, all the predatory kind of situations and sexism we exist within, but we don't take away the sexual agency of human beings and the complicatedness that is sexual interaction. How do we find a language for it? And I think we can't be fearful of doing that, right? We have to make a gesture to open up that conversation. So when we asked women tell us a sexual experience you can't, your most memorable sexual experience, what we really got was some stories of violence, yes, but many stories of joy, awkwardness, stupidity. One girl who kept saying my vagina was broken because she never had an orgasm, and talks about the first time that she had one. Right? So actually it allowed a space for women to talk about sex in a diverse fashion, instead of getting locked into the conversation that is repeatedly being given to us publicly. I'm going to come to the end because soon Anna will start glaring at me and saying you're out of time. But I think that what I have learned from this lovers duet type of engagement with documentary and art is that, you know, a lot of lovingness is a question of paying attention to each other. Right? It's about really spending time to notice tiny things about the world and then create something out of that, which the world feels is a true, maybe not reflection, but evocation of itself, right? and has the poetic possibility of engaging with. So I feel like I should end with a song, because I started with one. I'm going to show you a film we made about consent. I made this film, I directed this film because there's a very popular video, which I'm sure all of you have seen, called Consent is Like a Cup of Tea. How many have seen this video? How many of you have shared it on Facebook and said, this is an awesome video? Oh, I'm glad nobody has. Okay, I hate this video. I'll tell you why I hate this video. Because I don't think consent is like a cup of tea. I think consent is like consent. And we need to find a language which is rooted in sex if we really want to talk about consent, right? And an honest language. I don't think that yes means yes and no means no finishes the discussion on consent. So I wanted to make this film. I didn't know how to make it. I was scared to make it because I didn't want to get trolled. And then I went to see a performance of something called Lavani, which is a courtesanal dance form from Maharashtra, the state I live in. It was like by far the sexiest thing I've ever seen in my life, because it was very funny, like very teasing and sarcastic and like very entertaining. You felt like you were a big strawberry when you were watching it. Like it was so juicy and experienced, right? And then I'm looking at these women and I'm thinking, like if you want to see a woman with agency, that's a woman with agency, right? She's continuously speaking in terms of sexual desire, and she's playing with the audience, and she's a gigantic lover's duet with the whole audience. So like you're watching her, and this is the kind of thing that they do, right? They look at men and they say, should we go? Like they make these gestures, and then be like, you have a bike? No. And look at somebody else and say, you have a car? No. And then they would make these kind of gestures, like you can't get it up type of thing, and you'd be like shocked, and you'd think, oh my God, they're doing this in this middle class, Brahmanical neighborhood. How are they getting away with it? But they are, because everybody is loving it. And while you're watching it, you're thinking like, I hope she looks at me, I hope she doesn't look at me. Right? So you understand why women who are desiring are so scary. Like it's so attractive and alluring, but it's also very terrorizing in some ways. So it was a salutary experience in that way. So we wrote a new Lavani about consent, which I'm going to show to you, and that will be the end of my lecture. You can ask me questions. But I hope you'll enjoy it very much.
Something that's a naazuk, and मी
So if anybody has questions or comments or things they feel like saying, or a song they want to sing.
So with Ish, when you got those pieces of art or pieces of poetry from people who were visiting the site, how many of those were anonymous, and do you feel that being anonymous or not being anonymous affected the number of people willing to be public about this?
So obviously the people in some total of poetry of material that we received, only one person wrote an anonymous ID. I find it pretty interesting and surprising that people write on their own IDs but may sometimes want to be published anonymously, right? Which is an option we give people. They can be anonymous, they can make up a name, that name can look like a real name or a made up name, that's up to them. We have no issues with that, and that helps people. If they know that they can be anonymous, they're more willing to share. But I think that for me it's very important that they trust us so implicitly that they reveal their real identities to us. And I have to say, sometimes there are people who've written for us who actually maybe a little bit well-known, right? And I have never felt tempted even once to tell a friend that, you know who wrote that poem, or do you know who's... I mean, I think it's so interesting, the relationship of trust that has grown between us and the audience. Another thing that I should say is that it's not like people send us stuff and we just put it on the site. We actually do have a very rigorous editing process, and that is why I think Agents of Ishq is very much like a documentary in a kind of, it's like like those deconstructed desserts of MasterChef, right? But it's like a deconstructed documentary, which is that we have a process where we send back questions when somebody writes a piece. Many people who write for us are not really good writers and are often not able to articulate what they are feeling. So there is a process where you're actually talking to them back and forth on email, where they express themselves better, and also we help them with the writing. We have an editing team that works to make their writing better, but never such that takes away their voice. But it's a complex process. It can take anything from 2 weeks to 6 months for a piece to come out actually. And every single person, excepting one, who has written for us has said, thank you very much, the kindness mattered to me a lot, thank you for treating me with so much love. So actually this is also an argument for a kind of practice, right? Where we can actually be loving with each other. We can have a loving eye, but we can also have a stringent eye. I mean, there's no contradiction between rigor and love. And I think that that's something that they too value, and they value the possibility of also, you know, because if we just put their story out, like, let me say there is a woman who really wanted to write for us a lot, and she kept sending us these like terrorizingly sensational pieces, because she's like, you want bold, I'll give you bold, and we're like, we don't want bold, we just want like real. And finally, you know, she was very, very keen to be published on Agents of Ishq for some reason. And I think that if we had just put it unfiltered, it doesn't really serve any purpose, because it reinscribes the sense of victimhood and horribleness, that the violence that is part of discourse around sex, mostly in public. So we don't want that to happen to people. Sometimes people don't realize it. And I think it's also tricky because, you know, there is a thing of clickbaitiness. You also want people to watch. So for instance, one woman, I forget what piece from Agents of Ishq I put up on my Facebook page, and a woman wrote in the comments, a woman whom I didn't know, wrote a very long comment and deleted it. Because I'm very rapacious, I immediately said, but was it, if it's too long for a comment but not too long for an article on Agents of Ishq maybe? And she's like, really? And then in 45 minutes I had a pretty good piece from her. So we worked on it a little bit, and it was the one that said, for 25 years I've been faithful to a husband who denied me sex. That was a very clickbaity headline to put, right? And I did it on purpose because I know this is a very common experience that people don't talk about, and I wanted people to read it. And when it first came out, she was a little unhappy. Like, she wrote to me saying that the headline, I feel troubled by it. And I was like, I know you too, but please trust me, it will be okay. And you know, within, I think, half an hour, she wrote back saying, I feel okay because I've gone and I've seen the comments of people and the way people are writing, and now I feel good. So it's very important that when we put out a piece, we do not want the kind of commentary that you see ordinarily on other sites, which may increase your traffic. But what is the point of that? That's not why we're in here, right? Not to increase traffic, but we are actually to make the world more loving. I really believe that. So we have to follow a different practice.
Thank you, that was fantastic. I'm delighted by the talk and the work, and it's a comment and thoughts that I'm having more than a question, but it seems to me that you started off with that clip about fearless, wondering, you know, been reluctant to call herself a feminist. And as I think about this more, I feel like we have become so didactic in our, and so prescriptive in what is okay and what is not okay. And we have privileged only the verbal in determining what is okay and not okay to the exclusion of other senses. And it's so timely what we're doing, because I feel we have in that process of becoming so prescriptive, become so judgmental, and so unloving and unkind. And we've removed that space for ambiguity and mistakes, which is really the place where I feel like you learn. You learn how to love, you learn how to have sex, you learn what you like, what you don't like, all of that space has been so constrained. And it's just taking the fun out of things. And I really appreciate the way you do this work with the playfulness that you bring into it, because I don't know, I just find that even in my classrooms and in general, like, we've lost the ability to laugh at ourselves, to have fun, and to be okay with making mistakes. We want to condemn so quickly. And I like this a lot. It was fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you. But I think also what you're saying in a way is everything has become literal-minded, right? Like, we have a literal-minded discourse. And it's the only place actually that we can go to undo that a bit. Because art is the place where we can be not literal, where every other sense can be allowed to have play and have equal meaningfulness. I mean, and that kind of entire mythic sphere of how we make sense of life and what are the things we draw upon, what is you are allowed to like and not allowed to like also. I think, yeah, those words are increasingly lost to us. So we should do what we can to bring them back.
Thank you so much for a great lecture. I also watched your two films on Monday, and I enjoyed the first film. Was it Sandra?
Where's Sandra?
Oh, okay. And also Partners in Crime. And a couple of thoughts came to me as I was watching those two movies, such as intertextuality of the process of making art, or your interrogation of the notion of self or individualized authorship. And those are some of the things that I was thinking of, which ties into some of the things that you brought up here, I think, and I thought that was wonderful. Having said that, knowing so little about feminism in India, I had a question, which is that your approach, the way that you structure your documentals is very different from, say, somebody like Michael Moore, who is fixated on his identity as a working class person from Flint, Michigan, right? And I was also thinking about that as I was watching the film, because he also uses a lot of cultural references, right? Michael Moore. And where, those differences, how those differences can be attributed to. I was also thinking about what you were talking about today, pertaining sexual violence, and how your brand of feminism tries to counter that. And I was wondering how you see some of the people who strategize differently, pertaining how to react against the sexual violence as such, which is to say that I am from Japan and I live in this country, so the cases I know really pertains what is happening in the United States and also in Japan. In the United States, of course, Harvey Weinstein's housing was a victim. And that took place, this is my understanding of what happened, was that there were a good number of courageous women who came out. And these were very individualized people, right? They got out of their anonymity, came out and condemned Weinstein, and that was how he was ousted. And that was how it got to be a collective movement. I was also thinking about some instances in Japan where sexual violence is also frequent, And there's been some interesting instances in Japan this year. For example, there was a journalist by the name of Shiori Ito who was raped by a fellow male journalist, a official who had connection to a Japanese prime minister. And he was working for a pretty big mainstream Japanese television station. And Shiori wrote this book called Black Box, which was just published earlier this year. I won't get parts of it, but I thought it was really quite interesting that she really forbeared her own self, in order to oust this guy. And there has been critiques of Shiori, but then again, her voice has been powerful enough that probably this big shot was probably ousted. So I was wondering how you see, probably there would be other kind of feminists in India, right?
Many.
Who would have a different kind of strategy. So I was wondering, how do you see your strand of feminism in relation to something more individualized, maybe even documentary making, or
I think essentially, the thing is that quickly to try to address the many questions you're bringing up. I don't know that one or two women coming out is what makes the movement. Like, it's a moment in a movement, right? And then it's also interesting why certain cases come into public light at certain times. Why didn't the New York Times write about these things 5 years ago, when everybody knows? In India, all of these things are open secrets, but nobody ever writes about them. What is it that makes it possible to write about something at a certain moment in the larger political sphere? So I think that those questions must be asked. It certainly becomes easier for somebody to say, okay, I'm going to come out and speak up. If they feel there is a kind of framework of support, if you feel that there will be, if a newspaper is going to do a rigorous investigation to back this up so that you will be believed, because women are still not believed. I think it's important to remember, it's not women speaking out that got believed. It's because the newspaper did that much investigation that actually people believed it. So I don't know that it has translated into people will automatically believe women when they speak, right? And that said, I think that everywhere, not just in India, there are strands of feminism which depend very much on legal frameworks. They genuinely believe that changes in law make for changes. There are other feminists who don't believe that more and more laws make things better. In fact, they believe more and more laws make things worse, because in a way it camouflages all the kind of undercurrents of society and power relations which actually lead these things to happen. When you think that really well-known actresses also spoke about having been sexually harassed, and you ask yourself the question, why is it that people with less power came out and people who had more power didn't speak up, right? So these are contradictions in the understanding that it's just about women speaking out. I don't think it is about women speaking out, and I think we have to be quite careful that the onus is not always on women. I think the other thing is that there are feminists who will say that there is a kind of a broader framework of sexism that we need to be talking about. There's an entire scaffolding of sexism that makes sexual harassment and sexual violence possible, and that it's important not to lose a distinction between rape, sexual harassment, molestation, etc. All these kinds of that, because if we don't do that, then we're making these polarities of sex negative kind of, all sexual violence is of one kind, and there can't be any kind of granular discussion about it. So I think that you have all of that kind of different feminist strands, and they are often very disagreed with each other, and all of that heatedness happens in India as well.
Very interesting, thank you.
And I mean, issues of race play into that discussion here, issues of caste play into that discussion in India also in a very violent fashion.
We have time for one more question, maybe? Someone's question?
Thank you so much. That was just so much fun. And on that note, I wondered, how are you able, if you don't mind sharing, to stay afloat as you are so playful and there's so much seriousness, and also clearly you're having fun. And I wondered if you could just talk a little bit about your funding and how do you keep going?
So I think if it is a courtesanal form, right? You must continuously find some patrons because it's not like you can easily make this into commercial. Like Agent of Ishq has a potential of some kind of commercial life in the world, and we are like we recently got approached by I Am Besharam, which means I Am Shameless, which is the biggest sex toy website in India, to do some branded content for them. And if we start to do that sort of thing, we might become financially self-sustaining. The question is, do we want to do it? Will we be able to do it keeping our principles still kind of more or less intact, all of that. But otherwise, most of my work has actually been supported by non-profit kinds of funding, and sometimes by peculiar funding like some dissemination project of an NGO, the money is given to make a film. But I would say that each one of those encounters actually have been of people saying that, oh, I really like your work, and would you like to make a film? The most common, when I made Cosmopolis, the film with the goddesses. Now, I made that film for an arts festival in South Bombay, and the film became very, very popular. It was a festival in which like 10 different filmmakers were asked to make a film each on food and Bombay, and I made this one. And so many people loved it. And then another arts festival started, a neighborhood festival started in this suburb called Bandra. And then they were like, we really like that movie, can you make a movie for us? And I'm like, yeah, okay, I want to make a movie about Sandra from Bandra. So they actually got a little bit of money from all the people whose names were mentioned at the beginning of the film, including Shah Rukh Khan. And then I got to make West Sandra. So I didn't make a whole lot of money, but I just feel like it's possible to make these films. This is awesome for me. Like, I'm not really thinking that I need to make money from these projects. And so I have to work like double, triple time. So personally, I have to do many things to earn money. Films don't really make a living in a big way for me. And I make a kind of sustenance type of thing with it. As long as the work gets funded, I think that's great. I think with the internet, a project like Agents of Wish gets funded also because finally funders can see the possibility of reaching an audience more directly than they could with documentary. So that's actually heartening for them, and it's nice for us. I think it is a new era in thinking about how people could fund stuff online to reach people and create new audiences and new conversations.
Thank you very much. Please,